All right, guys. So you might think that this is just me ranting, but I want to give you guys some context. Maybe we can take this country by country, or we can take this generation by generation. Because what I've seen is that as we start to slow down in terms of how much what the population decline is, or the fertility, the birth rate is in certain countries, we can definitely see that there are across the board in pre or countries that used to be industrial countries and Western industrial countries, we can definitely see that there is a trend of this, right? Where the birth fertility rate is 2 point something, or even in some places like Germany 1 point something. And of course, you can't have a point something of a child, so we'll just round it off if it's under 5 to be 1, right? Which in case of Germany is not replacement level. That's just the reality of the situation. So retirement for a lot of people in my generation is going to be really your retirement plan. If I'm being brutally honest, is going to be, do you have kids or not, and do you have a fail-safe proof plan in place where you are able to set your children up in a way to be able to support them in helping that in supporting you take care of you. And that's not something nice to say. In my previous video, I talked about being honored and feeling privileged in being able to take care of my grandchildren and being able to take care of my mother, who just turned 72 this year and is still fit and able to do a lot of things for herself. But we all know, if among her 5 children, that the day is slowly approaching where it will be a thing that we're going to have to discuss seriously about her absolutely stopping to work. Now she has the choice to do so. She has no physical ailments, and she's pretty much able to do a lot, if not everything, for herself. And it never came to her mind that that is going to be something that we are going to have to discuss as a family. And of course, it's not something that people in my generation take kindly to, as to be someone that is responsible for the care of their parents. And I think that that all has to do with attitude and what is the cultural dynamic of which in which you grew up around, in terms of how people feel the sense of obligation, duty, and privilege and honor to be able to do something like take care of their parents. A lot of people feel like this is a burden. A lot of people feel like if they do have children, that they don't want their children to take care of them, because it seems like it's a big ask, and based on what their experience was as children, or how burdened they may or may not have felt as a child for someone having to take care of them, will determine whether or not the sense of family responsibility is strong in their hearts or not. And I think in my generation, particularly what I see in Germany, and I'm just speaking about the people anecdotally that I've spoken to, I haven't actually done any statistical research on this, but I will and get back to you as to what people's attitudes are towards what their meaning of responsibility and maturity is. Because I have heard from a lot of people, and I've read a lot and have listened to a lot of videos about people who feel like having a responsibility, um, how will I say this? Maturity is not necessarily based on whether or not you have children or not. Adulting is not necessarily based on whether or not you have children or not. And I tend to disagree with that statement. I believe that being mature is definitely, parenting is definitely a natural part of maturing. And of course, while all parents, if everybody, people might want to have children, but people might not necessarily want to be parents, it does not necessarily mean that the reason why you are a bad parent is because you are ill prepared or had a bad childhood. Sometimes it's just the fact that you got to come to terms with some of the things and the mindset and philosophy that you have, and that this mindset and philosophy is based on heavily on your upbringing and the things you got or did not get around family orientation and culture. Now, when you were able, a lot of people say this here in Germany, that they're not a family oriented country, they're not a child oriented country, and that we can see is evident in the way how people don't want to have children. I find it very hilarious that a country who is the loser in one of the biggest wars of our time, um, would then see it as um, um, yeah, that they would see it as something as that today's day is definitely harder than it was maybe 100 years ago. Like, to me, that is a little bit of a strong disconnect about what hardship is. And I think a large part of that is based on what I've read from history, is how much stories and please correct me if I'm wrong. If you're here in Germany and you're listening to this and you're German and you have had the opportunity to talk to your great grandparents or grandparents, um, how much people don't talk about World War II in the context of how horrible it was. Now, because people in my generation think like, yeah, this is the worst time to be alive. Why would I want to bring a child into such a horrible generation in time? Dude, the people back in the day had double the amount of kids because they knew that half of them were going to die. And that wasn't in like just Africa, that was everywhere because your kid could just die of cholera or malaria or just something simple that, today, if you got in this day, there are medications and vaccine and treatments and even good food that will help your immune system to help you counteract whatever happens. Yet people feel like this is people, especially my generation, who have lived through what they have lived through, think that this is the worst time that you've ever been alive. Um, I don't want to knock and dismiss people's struggle. The worst thing you've gone through is the worst thing you've gone through. And I don't want to dismiss it by saying, hey, it could be worse. I just want to say that it could be worse. That when it in terms of comparison and what we are striving for, um, we really start to have to take very seriously the economic implications of what it means for child free for each individual person on the macro and the micro level, and stop thinking about it like we don't want to address this issue. I think if you are in a position as a woman who you're no longer able to have children or don't want to have children or feel some sort of pressure or a deep longing and desire within your heart to do something about this issue, it might be possible for you to start right now to treat the next child that you see kindly. And I know it might seem a little bit strange, and maybe the mom might look at you like, why are you being so weird? What the hell are you doing with my kid? But having a child friendly attitude, especially here in Germany, is a great start towards changing the attitude and mindset towards family and family life. I cannot tell you how many times, and I will not call this person out by name, because there are a few people that I know who have more than two children, who have been ostracized. Like, why do you have so many kids? I'm talking about women who have like three. There's one woman I know who had four, and she was seriously heavily ostracized for having so many kids, and people were annoyed. I think women like her should be congratulated and thanked on a regular basis and be offered support left, right, and center, because these children are going to be not only the future generation and the legacy of this country, but the future taxpayers of this country. And since a lot of us are going to be retiring soon, that is something that we want to encourage people to be able to continue to invest their time, energy, and creativity in the country, and not decide later on, hey, why would I live in a country that is not that wasn't even kind to me? Let me just go elsewhere, because that can be a serious reality for Germany. And I think that people who live in other countries where the situation is similar, um, going in a similar direction, should take heed, warning, and example about how bad it can get. Because people are right now starting to understand some of the infrastructural difficulties that Germany is experiencing across the board, and they don't understand why, which is hilarious to me because this problem is just not a problem of 5, 10 years ago. It has actually been in existence since 1960s, since the onset of birth control. And I'm not against birth control necessarily. Um, let me say that birth control is a completely different issue in itself. But these issues are so interconnected that you cannot take one away from the other without really looking at what each issue brings as a repercussion of the overall well being of a country's economic state. And I only want to talk about it from an economic point of view because it is seriously, highly personally driven with people's moral standpoints and issues and views. But if we could separate just for a moment our uh, personal views and moral standpoints from some of the real hard factual implications of what it means to not have any children, for a country to go through such a catastrophe, and just look at the numbers and the economics of it all, we can definitely see why addressing this issue from a different attitude and perspective is completely important for us to deal with yesterday. I want to thank you guys for stopping by. Have a good day, and I'll see you in the next video. Please leave your comments down below. Just be respectful about it, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.